Chris Withrow, I think we're live.
We're live. What's up, guys?
What's up, Joey? Thursday afternoon, Joey and Jason live training, baby. Today we're talking about identifying your bottleneck. Joey, how you feeling? What are you thinking this week?
Hey, man, I'm pumped about this one because we've just done this ourselves internally at our gym, so it was fresh on the mind, and it's something that I think that all gym owners, business owners in general, if they're good at doing this tactic, it's going to serve them just so much throughout the year. So I'm pumped to be able to go over this stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny, you introduced this idea to me, and I hadn't really, I mean, I do think about it, but I hadn't thought about it in this way. And there's so many different thoughts that I have on it. And so I'm actually really excited about our conversation today. So to kind of kick it off, the way I look at this is there's sort of, a global, what is the biggest bottleneck in your business? And then there's also sort of going to be like little sub conversations about like, well, what about in sales? What about in fulfillment? What about in retention or ops or whatever it is? And so, I thought maybe we'd kick off with just like, what is the way that you look at, identifying a bottleneck just in the whole business, right? Is there anything you want to start with there?
Yeah, I mean, well, if at first it's identifying if you even have a bottleneck, right? So it's pretty easy to identify. I mean, if you are executing everything, if you have all the pieces in place that you think you need to have in place, so like your vision is happening, right? But the results are not happening. Chances are one of those pieces is out of place, right? One of them is not working correctly. And so when I'm looking at trying to identify what I would consider to be a bottleneck, it is stopping the rest of the business from doing what they're supposed to be doing, or what their full potential, because this piece isn't working right. Like an engine that has a bad oil pump or something, it's going to stop the performance of everything else. And so the first thing that I always look at is, well, what is not a bottleneck, right? And so it's easy to over critique your own business, but you have to realize, like, if the bathrooms aren't getting cleaned frequently enough, like, is that the reason that you're not living the dream? Right. And so, like, don't over scrutinize yourself and really try to take a step back, a big step back. Sometimes it's really easy. Like if you go on vacation or something like that, just get out of your normal grind, take a step back and just look at your business, right? From as outside of your normal perspective as possible, and say, like, well, I mean, if this thing just always happened perfectly, I can see how everything else would fall in place, right? And so it's different for each business, and it's different for your own business at different times throughout the life cycle of your business. That it could be sales, it could be ops, it could be all of these different things depending on what's going on.
Dude, love it. I think you nailed that, and you gave me just a couple of things I wanted to jump off on. For starters, you mentioned taking a vacation or time away from the business. This is something that I believe very strongly, and I know you do as well. It's when I'm disconnected from the day to day. You hear things like, make sure you have time to spend working on your business as opposed to in your business. And so some of the things that I'll do is I'll literally just, like, on a Wednesday, middle of the day, take the dogs for a long walk, no headphones, nothing, just no inputs. I know you'll take the kids out to the park. Another thing that I do is I'll schedule and go on a float in a float tank, sensory deprivation tank, where every distraction is completely eliminated, and I can literally think and visualize about the business. Or, like you said, take a quick vacation, go for a weekend with the family. It could be in town, it could be up the street. I know you go to the Wisconsin Dells with the kiddos, things like that. But actually scheduling time to do that, I have made so much money doing nothing. I literally suggested the catchphrase to that company that owns the place. I was like, your t-shirts should say, it's pretty amazing what nothing can do, because that's like, I know.
Yeah, exactly it, because it's hard. It's really hard to, like, as crazy as it sounds, like it's hard to analyze your business from that level if you're so in the weeds. Like, look, if like a car engine, right? If you've identified that like your carburetor for older cars is fucked up, right? And you're in there tweaking it, is it all these little teeny details and wondering about airflow and all of these things. And you're like, maybe I can win the race if I do this and this and this. Like, you need to take a step back. Like, maybe you're driving the wrong vehicle.
Maybe
You know what I mean?
tire, right? Yeah, like
Yeah,
exactly.
like you're missing something. And it's really hard when you're in the day-to-day grind. So like exactly, like I'm going out of town next month for just 3-4 days. But during that time, I absolutely will, my state of mind will switch, and I'll be able to look at my business from, a different vantage point, which helps. It helps. I get really creative during that time. And I'm just able to problem solve a little bit better when I'm not really like in the minute details. And so if you're an entrepreneur, like, and you feel bad about doing that kind of stuff, because I know that's something I struggled with for a while. I was like, well, I'm not, I should always be working. Look at it as if you are working. You're just working at you're doing something that needs to be done so you can get that vantage point. At least that's how I justify it to myself. So you know what I mean? It just helps. Where it's like, look, I need to get out of here so I can get a new vantage point and see if there's anything I can come up with that I otherwise could not. Right. I otherwise could not come up with this solution. So it's required for me to go and do this. And it helps me a lot. And it works.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the thick of it, and it's so funny because I think it's cliche in our business, both our fitness business, but also like our business, where it's like, yeah, you got to be out on the work on the business, not in the business. But the truth is we still every single day talk to people who know that, who've heard that, and they're like, yeah, well, I also fill up my days doing personal training all day, and then I have, I have to do sales all night, and I do this, and they don't build any time in to improve their business. And like you said, a lot of times you're face to face with a tree, and you don't realize you're standing in the middle of the forest.
Well, that's where the growth comes, guys. I mean, that's where all of the growth comes. So it gets exponential, it gets compounded, right? So like you start growing your business when you're doing all of the day-to-day stuff yourself, but then you'll get capped off at the ceiling, right? And then you delegate something, whether it's training in the morning. So you use that time to work on your business, right? Not you might switch it out with sales, but you guys get the point. Is as you get time back, you'll start working on your business, which allows it to grow even faster. And then you delegate again. So it's a compounding effect. The more, like right now, I can grow my business faster than probably any other gym out there because I'm spending all of my time working on it. Right. And so it accelerates, it snowballs as you start working on your business. You're able to work on it more, which is the catalyst to growth. And so it's really cool to be able to, that's how you could spend a ton of time getting to, 300,000, but you can go from 300,000 to 700,000 a year, just like that, because you've moved yourself out of a certain role. And now you can just do nothing but focus. Like, imagine if you had all the time in the world to just think about how you could make your business better, right? You're not bogged down with training sessions. You're not tired as shit from sales all night driving home. And like the time you drive home is the time you get to think about working on your business. Cause as soon as you get home, you have to do dinner. Like, imagine if you didn't have any of that and you just all day focused on how you could make your business better. Well, that's a real thing, right? And that's what I do all day. That's what Jason does. And so it becomes amazing. Then you just tell your team the things that you've been thinking about all day, right? And so to bring that full circle back to bottlenecks is that is as the owner, as the visionary, that's something that you need to program into your day or week or month. It depends on how much time you have available, but it's something you should always be looking at, because if you don't look at the big picture, you could be spinning your wheels for a long time. And so I think on this call, we'll be able to help identify maybe what some bottlenecks could be. And if you're experiencing certain problems, where you might want to take a closer look at, and if you fix that, what it would look like after you make that correction.
Oh, that's awesome. So we talked about like setting aside time, and giving yourself the opportunity to identify these bottlenecks. I actually want to take a couple of minutes here and talk about, so I do a lot of visualization. both literally, like I visualize things, and also like figuratively, like metaphorically. So if you've worked with me in the past, you know, I talk a lot of metaphors. And so like, what I will tell you is I use different, I'm curious what you do, but I use different types of visualization and metaphor depending on what I'm doing. And so like the easy one is holes in the boat, right? And that's the phrase that you and I have already thrown around. And so I think of my business as a boat, and I just know that there are infinite amounts of holes in the boat. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are so small you can't even see them. But when I look at visualizing the holes in the boat, what I'm thinking is, what am I losing? What's draining from my boat, or what's coming in because of the hole in my boat? And so like that puts me in a place where I start to think of like money walking out the door. So I think retention, I think, you know, maybe I'm not getting people to show up for opt-ins or schedule rates and things like that. And so what I'll do is I'll say, okay, what are all of the holes in the boat? By the way, if you don't own a whiteboard right next to your workstation, get one right now, because that's the most effective thing for this type of work. But I'll write down, I'll literally sometimes draw a boat. At our last mastermind, we had a boat diagram, and literally just draw from tip to tail. What are the holes in the boat at the front end at acquisition? What are the holes in the boat at fulfillment or onboarding? What are the holes in the boat for retention or ops or finance or whatever it is? And then you look at all the holes and you say, okay, which one is letting the most water in the boat right now? Bam, that one, that thing. And that's what we focus on. And then I have a couple more. I don't know if you had any comments on the holes in the boat.
No, I mean, I like you do. I do a lot of visualization as well. When it comes to the gym, I do it differently for the gym than I do for like my personal goals or even Fitbis. But for the gym, I can't stop myself from constantly putting myself in the shoes of a brand new lead, and what that customer experience is like. I'm walking through the front door. Who do I meet? Who greets me? Right? Like putting myself there, you know, and who greets me, and what do I do while I'm waiting to talk to whoever I'm supposed to talk to? And does that person introduce me? Like, is it going to be a coach? Is it going to be a salesperson? What does that conversation look like? You know, then I sign up or I don't sign up, right? If I do sign up, like what happens next? Do I talk to a coach? Like, I'm not really even sure. Like, is it smooth? Right after that, like, how do I get introduced to the workouts? When is the schedule going to be? Like, I go through every single scenario and identify like what touch points are supposed to happen every single time, and make sure. And sometimes by doing that exercise over and over and over, all the way to like what's making me want to stay here for as long as I possibly can. And if I'm a member that's been here for 4 years, like what has kept me here? I just am always looking at it from the customer's point of view. And that gives me a super heightened sense of detail, right? So if I walk in my gym and I see trash laying over there, like what do I think about that? Right. And what opinions am I forming? And or like, if you put yourself in that position, you're like, man, I don't really know if I want to buy anything from Jake. You know, maybe Jake is your bottleneck, right? Or if you do get sold because you love Jake, but then the coach you get put with is not, it's not what the sales guy said. Like maybe that's your bottleneck because the experience is so much different, and then you're wondering why people are leaving right away. So for me, it's easier to identify like the processes and the people, right? I always, and you guys hear me talk about that a lot, is like if this experience didn't happen exactly how we wanted it to happen, what went wrong? Did the person do something wrong, or was the process wrong? Right? And so I spent a lot of time like, because a bottleneck to me can be either, it can be a person or it can be a process, right? One of like, a person can bottleneck your business, right? Just because they are you know, like you could have a bad coach and it crushes your retention. Especially if you only have two coaches, you know, one and one other person, like that can totally crush, and you need to fix that freaking thing. You could have a bad sales like process. So like your sales guy didn't get a script, or they don't really know, like it could be a good person, but they like, you know, and that could like, your business can't grow until you fix that thing, right? And so it's hard to get that perspective. But if you put yourselves in the experience of the customer, at least for me, it makes it easier for me to identify that. because I kind of take a step away from the business owner and I go into a different like, well, what would I want type of thing, if that makes sense.
Dude, you nailed it. And the fact that you intuitively realize that about yourself, because that's something I learned going to your gym. And it's something I do, but not as well as you do. Like when you walk into your gym, and even when you explain your gym to other people, other gym owners, you can see so clearly it is a physical funnel, right? Like you walk through the door, this is a welcome place to be, and this is where you sit. Well, incidentally, there's this messaging and this video playing on the screen. There's all so much thought and care, even to like, this is the waiting area to get measured when we have groups, and this is the thing we want people exposed to it.
Well, that's because I'm a very system and process person. So my bottlenecks typically tend to be people, right? Because the systems and everything that's one of my strong suits, right? So for me, it's usually people.
Yeah, and that's pretty obvious. The other two, I don't want to spend a ton of time on them, but the other two types of things that I do to visualize, and I've done these both a lot. More recently, it's been, what is our speed limit? And so in other words, we're traveling down a road. I literally visualize us, FitBiz, my gym, whatever it is. We're traveling down a road and we're driving a really fast car. We have great people, whatever it is. What is the one thing that is slowing us down right now? So maybe the carburetor is going to stop me from going 100, but the flat tire is stopping me from going 10. Right. And so like, why am I worried about going 100 when I can't go 10? Right. And so I love the idea of like, what is my speed limit? I think about that when I think about growth, when I think about wanting to go faster, when I think about a team that is, feels ready to go, but for some reason there's some problem. So that's one that you and I have both talked about. And then the other one, which is kind of totally different, is I will actually, and I do this in a float, but I will actually visualize like a big table. And on that table is every asset that I have in my business. It's each coach, it's each class type, it's the physical location, it's the advertising that we may have, it's the sales process that we have. And I look at that and I say, is this the most effective way that I can take these parts and engineer them into a money machine, right? And I really have done that a lot. And if you really know your business, you'll suddenly see sometimes when you do that, like, oh, this is more of like a right person, wrong seat type of thing, or maybe wrong. Like the good example I will give you is I had 3 different people telling me the same thing, and I wasn't hearing it until I did this. And this was the peak of the 6-week challenge. And I had, everybody was going right into class. And as you may know, we run a CrossFit gym, which has some higher skill stuff. So everybody's going right into class. And after a quick, like 4-week on-ramp. And I remember the coaches were complaining that every single day they had to teach the new movements and it was slowing down class. And, I would kind of satisfy those, like, guys, just work with me. We'll be better. We'll be okay. And then I had the experienced athletes were starting to raise their hand, be like, hey guys, I'm sick and tired of learning the pull-up every time we do it. And this is kind of a drag. And then the third thing was the new people were like, gosh, we don't feel like we're ready for all these big CrossFit movements and blah, blah, blah. And so at each of those, I had been giving an excuse and kind of satisfying it. And it took me just stepping back and saying, like, is this the most harmonious way to be doing this? And I just realized that all 3 of them were telling me that we needed more of a longer term on-ramp for people to come. It doesn't matter specifically, but like it showed me like there's information that's being given to us as owners all the time about our business. And a lot of times, if we just solve the little fire, we'll miss kind of the big picture. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, especially during those 6-week challenge timeframes. I felt like there was a lot of fires that people weren't used to because it was just so new and such high capacity that it was really hard to, it certainly wasn't the 6-week challenge, right? That's what all the owners thought, right? It was something within it. When you take a step back, you realize like, hey, it could be this whole thing. And so what I've found when I take a look at the bottlenecks, particularly with the gym, is the majority of the time it's me. I'm actually the bottleneck. And so, and it's usually because of beliefs that I have or don't have yet. And so I'm not directing my team, the right way because I think a certain way, right? And so it usually is me. And if because even when it comes to a person, like it's highly likely that I didn't train them correctly, or I'm not leading them correctly.
Yep.
Right. And so very rarely is the bottleneck going to be something that you as the owner can't directly solve yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And so like the 6-week challenge was a great example. For me, it catapulted our revenue, because we were exchanging some high ticket programs for many mid ticket programs, right? So it increased our revenue, but what it also did was proportionally increase our expenses, right? And my I didn't have enough foresight to realize that it wasn't going to last forever. So I was spending expenses as if that was going to be my new revenue benchmark forever, right? And so it ended up causing a bottleneck for our business when it stopped working, which it did for everybody at about the same time. But I was very heavy on staff, very heavy on classes, very like to fulfill all of that. Do you know what I mean? I was built up really strong to fulfill all of that. But what happens when the revenue stops coming in as quickly? Now we pivoted fast and we made the adjustments that we made, but nobody was going to, like, that was a me thing. Like, I was the bottleneck. I was the one that had to see that and then make the adjustments, you know? And so I think there's a lot of, and it took a while for me to realize that and to make a full pivot. At least it feels like it. I don't know. A lot of people say I do stuff quickly, but to me, it feels like a long time to pivot away from that whole model and into a new model. You know what I mean? And so I think we could even go through some, if we have time, some specifics of what bottlenecks have been in your business and like how you solve them. And I could do the same in case anybody listening is like, dude, I have that problem too.
Yeah. Well, you know, to your point though, you kind of proposed a question, and that is whether you responded quickly or not. And if you respond quickly, the answer is that yes, you took action quickly, but it sounds to me, you know, respectfully, it sounds to me like me and like many of us, you were caught flat-footed, which meant you had only, when it went bad was when you decided to make the change, which puts you behind the game, right? And so ideally as entrepreneurs, and this is something that is the reason we set up our 4-part system of learn, practice, apply, teach, is because you got to apply it to your business. In other words, you need to be able to, no matter what it is, whether it's me and Joey, whether it's Tony Robbins, whether it's whoever you respect, you know, The Rock comes to your house and tells you this is the new best thing to do at your gym. You still have to run it through your core values, your mission, your vision, and what you're seeing in reality. And so ideally, and by the way, for the record, I too was caught, you know, in a situation where we expected it to keep happening, right? Expected things to be well. And the way I like to say it is, you know, Joey and I were lucky because our boat was already close to the vacation. We were already close to the island when the boat started to sink. And so from there, it was easy to swim to the island and be where we wanted to be. But we were caught flat-footed. And because of that, well, then you got to take action as a response to a negative input, as opposed to like in preparation for that thing. And I think that's just kind of a good way to cap that part off.
Well, and it's great to have us on your team too, because we are doing the exact same thing. And I feel very comfortable that if anything were to change, we'll be ahead of it before you guys would know, right? Because that's all we focus on now. Whereas back then, nobody was ahead of the curve, right? Nobody had the next thing, right, for people to pivot to as far as a mentor goes. And that's something you'd expect. Well, I shouldn't say that. There were next things, but they were not, at least for me, they were not something that was going to solve the problems that I had, right? And so I feel confident that Jason and I are able to always be able to see that, even if it's a week before you see it, we're pretty quick to be able to come out with a solution before you see an issue happening or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And then, so another little thing about me is, I know we were both in the Army, and I'm not sure if your experience was similar in this regard, but I was in like an electrical engineer type role. I mean, in the Army, that means I pushed a button on a green box. But, I did learn electrical engineering. And one of the things you learn in any kind of engineering, if anybody out there has taken a class, is troubleshooting. And so this only can have a series of outputs. And then when you get to this level, it's like a bracket system, can only have these outputs, can only have these outputs, et cetera. And so like you talk about identifying bottlenecks. I mean, the number one that we look at, most gym owners should be looking at every single week is your acquisition funnel, right? Like how much dollars did you put in? How many people opted in from that, or how many people clicked, and then how many people opted in? How many people booked an appointment? How many people showed for an appointment? And how many people closed? And you can add to this too, but to me, it's very, very simple. I literally start at the top. I think of it like a human body. I start at the head and I say, okay, what could be wrong here? And what are the percentages? Does that seem about right? Right? And then I look at the next thing and I say, what could be wrong here? Does that seem about what I expected? And if not, what could have went wrong? And then I work my way down that list. And I literally have done this live with most of the people listening to this call, where I then ask, what do you think the big problem there? You got a $10 cost per lead, you got a 70% schedule rate, you got a 10% show rate, and you got a 90% close rate. Well, holy shit, it's your 10% show rate. Well, let's open that book. What can we possibly do that would affect show rate? Okay, have we done this? Have we tried that? Have we tried that? Have we looked at that? Right? Does that make sense? I don't want to get too hyper detailed, but that is genuinely how I analyze. Like if my focus shifts to acquisition or to the sales funnel for that portion of the weekly meeting or whatever it is, that's how I think about it. Do you think about it that way, or do you think?
Yep, exactly. And you can do it to any aspect of your business when you're looking at, retention, and you take a look at fulfillment, right? You can break that into a few different pieces, and maybe you identify that one of those pieces is not very good, right? Or at least, maybe you're missing a piece, right? Maybe you're not doing accountability at all, and people are just having their initial nutrition orientation and then doing group workouts. But outside of, like, if they're not at your gym, you do not care about what they're doing, right? That could be something that makes your memberships way less sticky, right?
Yeah.
There's no real relationship there. And so now if you're doing our program, we've overcome that by assigning a coach. Right now, if one of your coaches isn't doing that, then that's a conversation you have with the coach.
Guys.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant me. I thought you were saying me as the coach. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I dropped the ball.
No. For your gym, you know what I mean? If you're following our program, right, then each one of your members should have somebody that is assigned to them. If it's you,
Yeah.
So, but the point is, like, yes, I do analyze it like that, and I think it does apply to, all of the aspects of your business when it comes to trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the beauty of a program like ours, is basically, if you think of your business is a series of questions that must be answered for the client and for running things smoothly, what we've done is we've put together not just the answers to the questions, but also sometimes what the questions are. Because some people, you talk to somebody, hey, do you have a referral program? Nope, never even thought about it. Okay, so it's not that you had the wrong answer, you didn't even consider the question, and that's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up. That's what you and I have done. And we continue to uncover things. We had a conversation yesterday about something we're testing where it's a new answer. It's a new answer for a similar question, right? And so to me, like, think about, your business is a quiz, and without somebody like us, you can be answering questions and just not even knowing there's a bunch of other questions. Like you talk about, how many people have been listening to this call going like, I'm going to stand at the front door of my business next time and look at it a little differently, because they're going to try to visualize it through their client's eyes. I know for sure that many of them probably have not really done that exercise. And I think that's valuable. So we're giving you sort of, it might not be the only answer, but it's an answer, and it's knowledge that question needs to be answered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man. There's even a show about it. It's called Undercover Boss. It's really cool, man, because these CEOs, they pretend to be customers or whatever, and it's kind of cheesy. But the whole point of it is they're able to see things about their business that they had no idea was happening. And the decisions that they can make, which is what they're paid to do, can have such a compounding effect on the rest of the business. And you can do that at a micro level too by just visualizing it, right? And so you want to talk about some bottlenecks that you've had and how you fixed them?
Yeah. So when we were, so for instance, we had an opportunity when we found, so I'm trying to pick one. I wasn't ready for that. Okay, I got one. So when we were starting to ramp up, so basically in the very beginning of something new, you test it and then you find something that works. So we had an acquisition strategy that was working really well. And so at that point, we had a proof of concept. And then in order to profit from that, this is something we teach people all the time, but in order to profit from that, we had to ramp it up. And so if I figured out that I could spend $10 to get a lead, give or take a couple of dollars, whatever it is, right? Then I knew every time I put $10 in, I can expect a lead. Well, now I can put more of those $10 bills in, right? So that's how you eliminate that bottleneck. And then when I figured out that, and I'll skip a few, but when I figured out that my acquisition system would convert every 10 leads into a client. So it's $100 to give me a client. Well, now I go, okay, I want to go to the market and buy some fucking clients. Here's $1,000, give me 10 clients. Like you can really start to see that. And then I think you and I, and we share a lot in common in the way we think about these types of things. But one of the things that you and I really had was we recognized that and said, oh, okay, well, I'll put my house on a second mortgage to just drop $100 bills in there and buy clients because these clients are worth thousands of dollars, right? And so that's that. Well, then the bottlenecks start to become operational. How many can I bring in reasonably without ruining my community every single day, week, month? Right? And so then you have to start looking at, okay, well, what is the bringing in process? Well, right now we have a one-on-one and we have a one-on-one nutrition briefing and a one-on-one this and a one-on-one that. I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Well, then I better charge a lot of money for that person in order to make that worth my while. Otherwise, let's start doing a 20-on-1. You know what I mean? Like, and so that's sort of how I would look at it is what is the thing that is my biggest speed limiter? And so in our case, back in the day when we were doing a lot more like a treadmill type situation, we figured out a way to bring in 82 people a month, every single fucking month. We brought in 82 people a month. And I could tell you exactly what was wrong if we didn't hit that number, where it's like, well, did we spend enough? Yes, we spent enough. Well, did we take enough at bats? Yes, we took enough at bats. Did we get enough closes as a percentage? No. And so I literally conditionally formatted my spreadsheet for my KPIs, again, a little deeper than I intended to go, but that way I would have it jump right out. Green, 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 yellow, red. Okay, boom, that's it. And it's just a range, right?
Yeah.
Is that within range of what we expect? And so both you and I, just like off the top of our head at this point in our careers, could probably tell you like, I want to see this much for a lead. I want to see this much percentage show. I want to see this much percentage close. I want to see this many percentage of trials convert into ongoing memberships. And that's how I go about it from at least from like that part of it. As far as personnel, maybe that's a different part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I've had probably a dozen different bottlenecks throughout owning the gym, maybe more. It depends on what you do, identify as a true bottleneck versus like just something you want to work on. But they certainly, when you fix one thing, it most likely will create another one. That's just business, yeah. Right? And the amount of time between you identifying the new problem and fixing it is usually your rate of growth, right? And so if it takes you a long time to identify an issue that you're having, and or maybe you identify it and it takes you a long time to fix it, right? Either way, that's usually obviously stopping you from growth. It's just kind of the definition of a bottleneck. So looking back at my gym, I mean, obviously the first one for us was space, right? Which is why we had to move, right? And so you're never going to have $1 million gym in 1,000 square feet. Like, it's just not possible.
Well, not right? Unless you're training actors and musicians or something, right? Sure. It's a function of, yeah, but I agree with you completely.
So, I mean, that's an easy one to identify is like, look, everything's going great. We're out of room, right? And so obviously to fix that, we moved, right? Now that was a calculated process, but once we made a decision, we did it fast. I've ran into bottlenecks where we could not keep people on a 30-day LBO. We were using Groupon at the time. And we had a lot of people coming in and doing it, but we were having a hard time keeping them. And after taking a step back and looking at it, what I ended up doing was when they first came in to redeem it, I did a sales meeting then instead of at the end, right? And that's how I fixed that bottleneck, because what I realized is after they finished their 30 days, I went to go pitch them, and the majority of them wouldn't even show up for that meeting, right? And so it took me a while to figure that out. It seems easy to understand in retrospect, but when they came in immediately, I pitched them on our memberships, and I gave them the first 30 days for free in exchange. It was a better membership than they would have gotten with the Groupon, but I gave them that in exchange. I changed out their Groupon for a higher ticket thing and kept them on continuity, right? So I fixed that bottleneck, and we kept growing again. Another bottleneck I had, shortly after, I'd say a year after that, was for whatever reason, our closing percentage just got lower. And of the people that were closing, it didn't seem like they were having the best experience. And I kept coaching and coaching and coaching my sales guy. And it wasn't until I made him record things and then I listened to those that I realized what it was, right? And he was not a very good guy. His name is Leo. Leo, if you're listening to this, eat shit, because
on blast. I love it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But he was not a very good guy. He was lying to customers. He was telling them that we were partners in the business and all sorts of weird things that was not at all the coaching and conversations that we were having together. He was a real used car salesman, and I couldn't put my finger on it until I listened to it. And then I realized that, and he was not even obviously ashamed enough, because he didn't change his sales technique knowing I'd be listening to it. So those are examples of bottlenecks that I had. And when I fixed it, obviously with that last one, I ended up replacing him. I went back into sales for a little bit, so my new replacement could shadow me and do it exactly like, I had no shame in having two people in the room, and one just listening while I just freaking repped out sales for like a month straight. But I was able to fix each bottleneck, and as soon as I did, we went back to growing again, right? And so that's just the nature of it. And nowadays I don't attack bottlenecks as aggressively as I used to, because we're doing well and we're really comfortable with where we're at. And we're not really looking to grow exponentially, because with that growth will come more problems, but we're pretty satisfied with where we're at. And so, of course, that comes down to me and where I want to put my attention. I want to put it on FitBiz and not my gym. And if I put all of my attention on the gym, I'm sure it would keep growing, right?
Yeah, 100%. And so, for starters, if you're listening to this and you're not recording your sales calls or anybody's sales calls, look, you just got to do it. We do it as a part of it's a part of what we do. So every single week you should be listening to a sales call. If it's yourself, you should be listening to it, because we don't have the ability in the moment to necessarily know the idiosyncratic things that you're doing or saying. I've heard calls of myself letting people off the hook. I've heard calls of, I've watched myself do and say things that, like, even now when I'm on a call with you, like, and I learned this in school, but I'm trying to be an active listener. And by the way, it's not fake. I enjoy talking to you, Joey, and I really am interested in these conversations. But I want to make sure that, like, if I was sitting over here like this while Joey's talking, or if I was like, I try not to interrupt, but if I was interrupting every couple of seconds, like, that's not, you have to be able to find those things. And you, believe it or not, you may or may not be able to see those. So if you're not recording your sales, if you're not recording your customers or your client, your salespeople's sales, you're just saying to the universe, you don't want to make more money. And that's what's leading me to the second and bigger point, which is, like, right now, everybody, including me and Joey, take just a second to realize you are exactly where you belong in your business. Your business makes exactly as much money as it should. And you have exactly as much stress and hard work as you should. If you haven't been open if you've been open for longer than 6 months, whatever number of members you have, that's the speed limit of your business right now. And I've learned that the hard way. For the first 7 years of my business, it was really an afterthought. It was a muse. And I never could break that Dunbar's 150 number. And there was a reason for that. I didn't have a business or any systems that would be capable of handling and fulfilling and giving a great experience for more than 150 people. And so genuinely, you know, Joey and I both talk about extreme ownership. That's a shared value that we both really believe in and a phrasing. And genuinely, if you can't sit there and explain and truly believe that your business is exactly where you have put it, then you really should reconsider that as a notion, because it really is true. You know, I've heard Elon Musk say this in the opposite, and that is, you know, the world's richest people, the billionaires, they're just the best allocators of resources. They make good decisions. They put capital in places where it grows. And so we give them more and more capital. That's why they have it. And so that's why I don't, for the record, believe that we should take extra of it from them, because that's how you get to Mars, right? Any thoughts about that? I have another example, but it's kind of a different thought.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I mean, I was able to articulate, I think, everything that goes through my mind when I'm trying to identify a bottleneck. But if you're listening to this and you're having a hard time identifying a bottleneck, just drop in the comments what your problem is, and maybe we can help you out. Just drop in the comments, you know, what problem you're experiencing right now that you think is limiting your growth, and we can kind of look at it from an outside point of view, or anybody else that's in the group, help you maybe see something that you can't see right now.
Yeah, and I know one that's going to be in there, and I want to address it real quick. Let's say it's show rate. I know we've had some comments and questions in the thing about show rate. We continue to try and improve and hack show rate, but I do the math with clients every single week. And even with a show rate of, let's say your show rate's 20%, it's not good. Should you be working on it? Absolutely. But if your cost per acquisition is $65 to $150 and you're collecting $300 a month from these folks, I don't care. You're making double your money every single month at $150 acquisition. And so don't fool yourself. I had a conversation with somebody last week where they were like, I don't want to ramp up ad spend because my show rate is terrible. And I'm like, well, what's your cost per acquisition? It's like $115. And I go, your average upfront cash
and that's exactly what I talked about in the beginning. Yeah. You're falsely identifying something as a bottleneck. Yeah. That's not your problem. In that scenario, the problem is you're not spending enough money.
Yeah,
because you're positively, you know what I mean? Your lifetime value far exceeds your cost of acquisition. So is that something that you would want to fix? Yes. But sure. Is it a true bottleneck to your business? No.
No, it's not. The bottleneck in that case, really, Joey, is your belief in your own system producing a positive ROI, even though every single week you're seeing, oh, we made a 400% return last week. Oh, we made a 600% return last week. Don't focus on the forest when the trees look great. You know what I mean? I want to shift a little bit to operationally. So, you know, I went through 3 phases as a gym owner from the beginning to the middle to now. And in the beginning, I was hyper controlled. I wanted to start this business with my 2 friends, and everything everybody did that wasn't like me was wrong. And I think that's incorrect. To be clear, I just want to put that at the outset, like, don't be an asshole. But I was an asshole. I was like, no, it should be this way. I want to make sure it's coached this way. I read these books, and that's why. And I was very hyper controlled. And then very quickly, I learned that nobody wanted to work with me because of that. And so I adapted that. And I said, okay, so now I need to learn, okay, Jason's a little crazy. Let's just use a little Kentucky windage in there, and we're going to let people, I'm not going to micromanage you. Everybody, you're a good guy, you're a good gal, you know about fitness. I'm going to let you do your thing. And I did that for a long time, and that felt good. But then I would realize we would have these events, and I coach in the evenings, and only the evening folks would ever show up to events, never the morning and never the midday. And then we would have these weekends where we would do a tough workout, and the evening people would just smoke the morning people and the midday people. I'm like, what is the difference? You know, I know a gym owner down the street, and he coaches in the morning, and his best athletes are there in the morning. So it's not like a time of day thing for real. That's a limiting belief. And so what I found out was that I had to I do things like I always ask a question of the day. I push people a little harder, maybe. Or I, at the end of the class, would always have everybody put their hands in the middle pre-COVID, and 1, 2, 3, lame cheer, you know, and we would do that. And I remember thinking, like, I don't want to micromanage these folks. But genuinely, when I did write the SOPs to that level where it was like, there will be a question of the day every day. If the person has good technique, you should encourage them to, if that's the purpose, you should encourage them to push themselves just a little bit. And then if at the end of class, every single day, we're going to do some sort of a 1, 2, 3, whatever. And honestly, as lame as that all sounds, like all of a sudden we started to see the same culture trickle through. And this all, of course, leads to my drum that I always beat, which is core values. All of a sudden, I went from having my own core values. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. Having my own core values in the evening, which were not represented in the morning and the midday. And I found a way to make sure that just the coaches knew, hey, these are the core values. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do the other. This is why. And all of a sudden, we had like just way more people showing up to social events and way more people bringing referrals, to the extent where now I have like competitive, or not now, but let's say when I was in the gym more, I have like competitive athletes who are super involved and they train at 5 a.m. I never seen them work out, but they're a part of this thing. Does that make sense? And that's my story.
Yeah. So it sounds like at first you were scared to micromanage. So you confused micromanaging with, enforcing your core values, which guys, that's not, enforcing your core values is not micromanaging. The way I look at it is you enforcing your core values is telling people what to do and why to do it that way. What you don't want to do is tell them how to do something, right? And that's the biggest difference, is always tell them what to do and why to do it that way, but don't tell them how. Like, hey, you got to put your hand in like this because that's how I like to put my hand in. That's micromanaging, right? Or you have to do like, and so to be able to realize the difference, like, because yes, dude, it sounds like we had a very similar business when we first got started. My mentor told me, which is very bad advice, that if you lead by fear, you will accomplish more.
Was he a master sergeant or like a first sergeant from the Army or something?
No, it was a business mentor that I had, who never had a business to the levels that I was able to accomplish, which is probably because that's how he led. But that didn't work. And I was big on micromanaging, knowing that, because I thought it was the way to do it, right? I thought like everybody should do exactly how I would do things. And you're totally just crushing their souls and like not letting them be people, right? And so it took me a while to realize that. But core values and that, I think, is what protects your business and creates consistency. So the customer, they all have the same experience. Your morning athletes will be as conditioned as your evening, and so on and so forth. So don't be afraid to enforce your core values, but don't get in the habit of telling people how to do everything, because it's very hard to have that kind of culture that you want when they can't even, there's no free will,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So are there any other bottlenecks so to kind of push this to the other side of sort of the ops and finance perspective, because I think we've covered sales and acquisition. I think fulfillment in general, we kind of just went through. For ops and finance, it's a little similar to sales for me, and you can speak to your method, but I literally look at, whatever it may be. Gosh, I can't, my ops person tells me I can't nurture more leads. We're dying. I can only handle 50 leads per month. Well, in my mind, I need to run that through a series of checks and balances. I'm like, well, that sounds a little light. So maybe let's talk about what you're doing. And so maybe you find out, and this is true for me, I found out at one point that my lead nurture person was spending like 20 minutes in conversations with each person. Well, that severely limits their ability to be effective across a broad pool of fish, right? And so you can look at, okay, am I paying the right person to do this? Is this the right person for it? Do they match my core values? Are they capable of that job? And then is what they're doing efficient? Is what they're doing efficient? And this ties into our acquisition efficiency we had a conversation about. And then I look at, okay, what do I need to change? Do I need to pay them more money per hour? Do I need to pay them for more hours? Or do I need to adjust what their expectations are of what the role is and create that more efficiently? And so from an ops perspective, that's how I look at efficiency. There's kind of like 3 dials, right? There's 3 dials I can change. It's how much I'm paying you, it's who's doing it, and how much time they're taking for fulfillment in whatever case. And then there's I lost my train of shit. What's the third one?
The process, like
The-
what they're
yeah,
what they're doing.
Yeah, what they're doing. Like if you're sending 20 messages to a lead who has never showed up, you're doing it incorrectly. You know what I mean? If you're writing the same email when somebody decides to quit and you're trying to win back their business, and you write that email every time instead of saving the best one ever, you're not doing it right. You know what I mean?
That's how I started diving into automating things, because I got really interested in it, but like I just realized just how much time it was saving and how much energy it would save to automate things. And as far as operations go, that's never going to happen unless you do it yourself. Like there's not gonna, you can't bring somebody into your business to automate things. Like the amount, like the things, what they would need to know about your business and how things work, it doesn't make sense. So hopefully, like we've tried to fast track a lot of that, but then yes, it takes away that heavy burden of somebody having to do those redundant tasks, because everybody's going to burn out doing those kind of things. I just think about like back in the day before they had automations, like you'd have to hire somebody to literally just type the same thing 1,000 times a day, and they just clocked in and did that and then clocked out. And
those monks used to like write books to copy them.
I know,
great.
man. Or just stamp, next one, stamp, and you're just like, But but in what Jason's alluding to is there are people in this world that enjoy doing those things, right? So if you have somebody in an operations role, or maybe not even enjoy it, but they can certainly tolerate it, and do an efficient job at it, you just got to make sure that you have the right person in a role like that. Otherwise, you can automate as many things as you want, but if the person legitimately hates doing operation type things, that's not gonna solve the bottleneck.
Yeah, you may have a core value fit. It might be the right person, but they might be in the wrong chair. And I think we both have examples of that that we could give. From a finance perspective, when I look at my finances, and I'm gonna go very high level on this because I can go into specifics, but at a very high level, what you look at is, okay, am I being efficient? Am I making enough revenue? Am I getting enough gross revenue? That's my first priority. Am I getting enough money into the business? And then I skip right to the bottom and I say, all right, am I getting enough of that money to end up in my bank account? That's like the very first thing that you should be doing. And then you should be flipping back and forth between cutting expenses and finding ways to grow bottom line. But it's not one answer. That's why there is no thing that Joey and I can ever provide for you that's going to solve any of these things. You have to be able to look at those and scrutinize them as the engineer or the troubleshooter would, and determine, is this a situation where I need to grow profit or shrink expenses? So for example, I know a gym owner, pretty respected guy, that used to do $100,000, not in this group, used to do $100,000 a month, but he paid $95,000 to do it. What the fuck are we doing? You know what I mean? And even for my own example, when I was very, very high, I actually made less percent profit at a very high number than I did at a medium number, and on gross and percentage. So I made more money at 50 than I did at 90 something in gross and percentages. And so I had to recognize, hey, look, I don't need more revenue. I need to really look at where my revenue is going. You know, we even have talked recently about, crazy payrolls or crazy ad spends, or putting money into something that's not getting the ROI that we expected it to, whatever that might be. And so what I would say is, from a financial perspective, my overarching theme would be, you need to go through cycles intelligently of either raising revenue or shrinking expenses. But you're rarely going to be able to do both at the same time. So it's usually one or the other if you're focused.
Yeah, the only thing I can add to that is when I started showing my team the profit and loss, in fact, it's the one in the spreadsheets, because that is not like from your accountants. It's your input. Like, this is how much recurring we have already scheduled for this month. These are all of our expenses. This is what our profit would be have we not sold anything new. So to hit our profit goal, which is this is what we need to sell, right? When I started doing that exercise with my team, the transparency that it gave them and me, because I'm looking at it constantly too, it really helped us do what Jason's talking about, is identify, is this a month where we can cut some expenses, or is this a month that we need to sell more? And if it's a month we need to sell more, like how are we going to do that, right? We already know what the expenses are going to be. Usually you can project it, right? And on the spreadsheet, it does have the projected versus actual, right? So, but guys, I would really freaking use that thing if you're not, because it helps a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And then another overarching principle, this applies to everything, is something in you and in me. I don't know if you always had it. I think secretly I always had it, but I didn't really recognize it until the last few years, is I'm much more interested in what I suck at than what I'm great at. I'm much more interested in, I remember selling 10 out of 15 and all I could think about was the 5 that walked out of the room. Now that's not healthy, but so within reason, that's not healthy. But in general, like I look for my limiting beliefs. I look for where my processes are inefficient or broken. I look for the right person in the wrong seat. Maybe that person could be benefiting us somewhere else. And so kind of an overarching principle is I'm always on a seeking journey of improving myself and my business. And in order to do that, you gotta love picking scabs. I get on the phone with far too many people that wanna tell me how great they are, but not achieving their goals. And the reality is the first thing that we need to do to begin to roll up our sleeves and work is to realize that you are exactly where you should be. And that in order to grow from that, you need to attack your weaknesses. I mean, I tell the metaphor I use with them will be if somebody walks in with a jacked upper body and a 500-pound bench and tiny little twig legs, we are not putting them on a bench for a while. We're definitely not talking, we're squatting, baby. We're squatting and deadlifting, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, similar. I mean, I don't particularly target my weaknesses, but I always am trying to improve my position. So like, I'll relate it to jujitsu because that's what you do. But like pulling guard is better than being in someone's guard. And then but it doesn't mean that you can't try to move to side control, right? Because that's improving your position.
Yes.
And life might be good in side control. There's a lot you could do there, but it's not as good as mount, right? So do you know what I mean? Like you can always improve your position no matter where you're at. And so that's something I take a look at is like, if I could fix this, if I could do this, if I could do this, I'm always trying to improve my position. And sometimes it's a big improvement, but it doesn't mean that marginal or smaller improvements are not worth your time, you know? Yeah. And so that's kind of the way that I look at it. I'm a big believer in really doubling down on your strengths versus
but I don't think those are mutually exclusive, because I agree with that. I think, like for instance, I'm not the one who's in charge of ops for FitBiz or for my gym or anything, because I know that's a weakness. Yeah. What I would say is more the system has a weakness. And so if the person in the ops role is there, both of us would agree that we need to fix that. That's the weakness, right? Because to your point, you want to separate that idea from the idea of, I once, not that long ago, in the middle of all of this growth, I was like, I want to learn how to code. I want to learn how to code so I can build my own websites, so I can build my own funnels, and I don't have to use Zapier anymore, which I'm deep into, right, as we both are. But this is like a shortcut for the real version. And I had a person that I very much respect tell me like, hey man, you can take a year, be worse at what you're good at, and learn how to be the worst coder, or you can pay $300 to somebody on Fiverr and get it done. Yeah. And I know you're a big proponent of that. So there is a difference between finding your weaknesses in the system and in yourself and things like that, and working on them, or at least replacing yourself in them, as opposed to, you definitely don't go learn how to code. And probably,
yeah, man. there's a lot of things that that people do, man, that, like you said, after a year, they'll just be marginally okay at it, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you said, hey, Jason, we're partners in this thing, we really need to circle the wagons, I need you to do all the ops, I would be like, okay, fine. I'll do that for the minimum amount of time that we can possibly, until we can get somebody into that role. Yeah. Because I'm just going to do a worse job at it, and I'm not going to enjoy it, right? Yeah. And so And that's why we make different decisions, just you and I as an example, or anybody, we make different decisions as we are successful. You get rid of different things than I get rid of on my daily plate. It's why you do different things in the business than I do. And it's why ultimately we balance each other out, I think, really well. It's because, the things that give you energy are a little different than the things that give me energy, right? And I think that's important to remember. I don't know, what else is there to talk about? Is there anything that we've missed when it comes to identifying bottlenecks, how to visualize it, how to improve it?
No, I mean, we're already past the hour mark. So what I'd say
Really?
yeah, we're cruising. For anybody that's watching is, again, guys, like drop in the comments, because we're like, this is a group coaching, right? We're doing this. We do this to coach you. So a lot of the times it's just a couple nuggets that you hear us talking about that you can pull out and apply to your business that isn't already in the course, right? Because we can't cover everything. That's primarily how I would use these calls on a weekly basis, is to listen to our experience. Largely we're talking about our own experiences, and see if you can find something within there that you didn't think about that way, that will end up causing you to take action in a positive way towards your business. So that's how I would use it. But then also you can comment below and we will get back to you, because this is our small tribe, right? There's only 80 people in this group, or however many. We will absolutely help you with these issues if it's not already something you and Jason are working on, privately. So that's all I have to say. And I think it applies to all the videos, not just this one. But
yeah, I agree. I think I know that it's an hour. It's an hour is a long time to listen to, and I think Joey and I probably could talk for 2 hours a week if we wanted.
yeah,
And I know you guys are busy people. What I would say though is, just like masterminding, is anytime you can hear somebody other than you, even if we weren't more successful, forget about that. Somebody other than you talk. I learn every time I'm on a call for long enough with Joey, because he thinks about things differently than I do. And so expose yourself. Everything is everything, but expose yourself to people who are different and have done things that you haven't. Maybe they're better. I have learned things recently from people who are less successful than me. I do it all the time.
yeah.
That's not the point. The point is to be exposing yourself to these types of processes and thoughts, and to be putting yourself through these exercises, right? Anybody who tells you they have all the answers is lying. That's it, man. I could talk all day,
Yeah. So next week, guys, we're going to be going over sales. We have already identified it as a topic that we want to talk about, because we just both spent a lot of time doing sales and love sales, and have been working on it recently. So we're going to talk about sales. So if you are interested in sales, of course, I will send a reminder and a post to remind you, but we are going to be talking about sales Thursday, 2:00 Central. Be there.
Great. All right, buddy.
All right, guys. Later.